Hey everyone, it's me, Barbara, a 41-year-old woman here to share a captivating story from a chapter in my life that unfolded a few years back, around the time I was celebrating my 38th birthday. Life took an interesting turn when I married Frank, linking me with a family of considerable wealth thanks to Frank's dad, Paul, a notable businessman. Paul and I first crossed paths professionally as he guided me during my tenure at his company, which eventually led me to leave my job to explore a romantic journey with Frank. Our bond was strong, built on mutual success, and a shared vision for a fulfilling life, and we eventually tied the knot with Paul's blessing. However, Frank's mother, Hannah, never saw me in a favorable light, believing her son should have chosen a partner from a more affluent background rather than someone with humble beginnings like myself. Despite her cold demeanor and elitist attitude, I chose not to confront her to avoid any discord. Unfortunately, keeping the peace didn't spare me from future conflicts. The situation escalated when I decided to quit my job, a decision that Hannah and Frank scrutinized harshly. They couldn't understand why I would leave a prominent position that was on the verge of an upgrade. Frank, the company was overworking me to the point of physical and mental exhaustion. You've seen the toll it took on me these past few years. It was imperative for me to step back, I tried to explain, only to be met with accusations of lacking ambition and resilience. Paul, ever the voice of reason, defended my decision, urging them to be more understanding and supportive. Despite his intervention, their critical views resurfaced whenever he was not present. Believe me, my last job was detrimental to my well-being, a fact even my therapist was deeply concerned about. Leaving was not a matter of choice, but necessity. While I was in between jobs and seeking new opportunities, my husband and mother-in-law showcased their disapproval once again by excluding me from Paul's retirement party, citing my current unemployment as a source of embarrassment for the family. This incident laid bare their shallow perspective and lack of empathy towards my situation. We can't have you overshadowing the event. It's a significant day for my father, and we don't want the chatter to revolve around Paul's unemployed daughter-in-law. The focus should remain on his achievements, not be diluted by gossip concerning you. I had hoped to be present to support Paul, as he's been a guide to me, and I consider myself part of his family too. However, it seems I'm being sidelined. Oh, come on. The last thing we need is for you to make a spectacle of yourself at the retirement celebration. If you had any dignity, you'd volunteer to sit this one out. Don't dare tarnish our esteemed reputation by showing up, they admonished. Barbara, do you actually agree with this? I questioned Frank, seeking his stance. Absolutely, Frank concurred with his mother. Nobody wants a failure at such a prestigious event. Consider this your final warning. Stay away. I was dumbfounded by their cruelty. The disdain from my husband and mother-in-law was palpable. They expressed shame in having me as part of the family. Frank's transformation into someone I barely recognized was a deep cut, exacerbating the situation to unbearable levels. That night, I wept uncontrollably, feeling utterly devalued and isolated, with Frank offering no solace, choosing sleep over consoling his devastated wife. My mental well-being, already fragile, was pushed to the brink. It was a night steeped in despair, one of the darkest periods of my existence. Paul remained unaware of Frank and Hannah's chemistry, as I refrained from steering any discord, especially not wanting to mar his celebratory occasion with familial tensions. Although Paul sensed something amiss, he didn't pry. However, a few days later, Paul seized a quiet moment to discuss the matter, away from the distractions of television and social gatherings. Barbara, there's something we need to address, he initiated, revealing his awareness of my exclusion from his retirement party, thanks to an observant assistant. His inquiry into who decided to leave me out hinted at his suspicion of Hannah's involvement. Paul's demeanor was one of solemnity, a reflection of his seasoned experience in navigating the demanding business world. His acute perceptiveness and comprehensive awareness of his surroundings were traits that commanded respect, often instilling a sense of apprehension in both Hannah and Frank. Despite his intimidating reputation, Paul maintained a surprisingly harmonious relationship with his family, showcasing a complex dynamic within our household. Paul has always expressed admiration for my dedication and hard work, which has given me a sense of security in his presence rather than fear. My respect for him, coupled with his open-minded nature and almost certain discovery of the truth, prompted me to be honest about my situation. After experiencing such harsh treatment from Frank and Hannah, I felt no need to shield them from the consequences of their actions. When I disclosed that, it was both Frank and Hannah who wished to exclude me from the party, Paul inquired about their justification for such a decision, finding it peculiar to consider a family gathering without his daughter-in-law. I explained that their reasoning was tied to my current unemployment. They were embarrassed at the prospect of explaining my jobless status to others, fearing it would reflect poorly on the family. This mindset stemmed from their disdain when I chose to leave my previous job, viewing unemployment as a mark of failure and dependency. Paul appeared surprised by this revelation, mirroring the disbelief I initially felt upon hearing their bizarre rationale. Frank and Hannah's elitist attitude and derogatory views on those without employment were already known to me, as they had directly labeled me as a loser and a freeloader. Paul remembered their earlier objection to my resignation and expressed his dismay at their continued elitism, particularly noting how out of character this was for Frank, who had grown increasingly arrogant and materialistic over time. He lamented over where he might have gone wrong with Frank, to which I responded that it wasn't necessarily Paul's fault. Frank's transformation could be attributed to his constant association with similarly minded individuals and his penchant for ostentation, suggesting a deep-seated need to maintain a facade of success and superiority. Paul's observations hit me with a harsh dose of reality. For years, I had noticed Frank drifting further into an unsettling pattern of behavior, his sense of entitlement growing increasingly intolerable. Despite my efforts to expand his worldview and challenge his prejudiced perspectives, he remained unyieldingly arrogant, a trait seemingly nurtured by his mother's approval. Following my departure from a taxing job, Frank's demeanor shifted drastically, his once respectful treatment of me devolving to outright disdain, as if I were insignificant. Paul's blunt question about my satisfaction with my marriage forced me to confront the truth I had been avoiding. My relationship with Frank was far from what I had envisioned for myself. I confessed to Paul that since leaving my job, Frank had become unrecognizable, diminishing my worth as an individual and bombarding me with derogatory labels such as lazy, loser, and even gold digger. It was ironic, considering Frank's own lack of ambition was the most pronounced I'd ever witnessed, making his accusations all the more ludicrous. Frank had distanced himself from my professional life, under the mistaken belief that he would inherit control over Paul's business in the future. This entitlement, Paul confirmed, was misguided, and revealed a troubling laziness and expectation of unearned success. Paul's reassurance was a balm to my troubled spirit. He denounced Frank as undeserving of a diligent and committed partner like me. His support for my decision to leave a toxic workplace was grounded in his recognition of their exploitation of my talents. Paul hinted at having significant plans for my future, ones that Frank was oblivious to. The stark reality of Frank's behavior, paired with Paul's insight, led me to contemplate separation. Paul's role as a mentor and father figure in my life lent weight to his advice, making me seriously consider the need for a drastic change in my situation. Facing the unrelenting disrespect from Frank and Hannah became unbearable. Their behavior aimed to humiliate and belittle me, starkly contrasted with the self-reliance and independence I've always cherished. The more I dwelled on Frank's actions, the clearer it became that staying in such a toxic environment was out of the question. My contributions and efforts, seemingly invisible to them, only highlighted their obsession with superficial appearances over genuine relationships, even if it meant hurting those closest to them, including myself. Paul's reaction mirrored my sentiments, offering a comforting yet stark acknowledgement of the situation. "The choice is yours, Barbara," he said, expressing a mix of disappointment and hope that having a strong partner like me might have encouraged Frank to shed his entitlement for ambition. However, Frank's consistent failure to rise to the occasion left Paul ready to support my decision to prioritize my well-being. Paul's encouragement was a beacon of support, affirming my feelings and aspirations. His words, "You are like a daughter to me, Barbara. Your future is bright, and I have no doubts about that," provided a much-needed reassurance of my worth and potential. Despite my appreciation for Paul's upcoming retirement celebration and the efforts Frank and Hannah had invested in its planning, their explicit exclusion of me had initially led me to accept my absence from the event, albeit with a heavy heart. Paul's mentorship and support had been instrumental in my life, and missing such a milestone in his life felt deeply disappointing. Unexpectedly, Paul's response to my exclusion from the party was resolute and unwavering. "Absolutely not. You're attending my retirement party, Barbara. Consider this a personal invitation from me, My assistant will send you the details. Don't worry about Frank and Hannah's reaction, he insisted, disregarding their preferences outright. His determination to have me attend as his guest of honor, asserting my inclusion as part of the family despite their objections, was both surprising and heartwarming. Paul's stance was clear. Family bonds transcend the superficial divisions Frank and Hannah sought to enforce, ensuring that I would not only attend the celebration, but do so with the honor and respect I deserved. Paul hinted at a surprise that could turn the tables at his retirement party, suggesting I might find a way to outshine Frank and Hannah's unkindness without any direct confrontation. His laughter, though mysterious, reassured me of his support. Having always regarded Paul as a paternal figure, his disapproval of his son and wife's actions bolstered my trust in him, igniting a spark of curiosity about his plans for some form of retribution. In the weeks leading up to the celebration, Paul advised me to pause my job hunt, which raised my eyebrows yet again. However, trusting his judgment, I decided to embrace a period of rest, especially after enduring a challenging work environment for so long. This decision, predictably, became another point of contention with Frank and Hannah. They accused me of enjoying a carefree life at their expense, to which I responded with a reminder of my financial independence and the necessity of a mental health break. Their accusations escalated, labeling me as a gold digger and forecasting a bleak future where I would deplete Frank's finances. Their harsh words solidified my resolve to end the marriage, leading me to consult a lawyer about divorce proceedings. The realization that my relationship with Frank had deteriorated beyond repair was a pivotal moment, one that underscored the need to extricate myself from this toxic environment. When I shared my decision with Paul, his immediate and supportive response was a comforting affirmation that I was making the right choice. Paul's smile, far from the reaction one might expect in such a scenario, signaled his unwavering support and perhaps a hint of relief that I was taking steps to reclaim my dignity and happiness. As I navigated the turbulent waters leading up to my divorce from Frank, I opted to delay the announcement until after Paul's retirement party. Given Paul's status as a well-respected businessman in our community, the event promised to be a grand affair. Despite my reservations about Hannah's character, I couldn't deny her knack for orchestrating a stylish celebration. Frank and Hannah, assuming I would comply with their wishes, left early with Paul, likely fabricating some excuse for my absence. Contrary to their expectations, I made my entrance when the party was already buzzing with excitement. Frank and Hannah's irritation was palpable upon seeing me. Their attempt to confront and dismiss me was abruptly halted by Paul's authoritative voice. He publicly welcomed me, much to their dismay, claiming I was the evening's guest of honor, a detail that caught everyone off guard, especially since Frank and Hannah had been so adamant about my non-attendance. Their feeble attempt to insist I was unwell and needed to leave was quickly overshadowed by Paul's assertion of my well-being and the importance of my presence. He revealed, much to everyone's surprise, that he had personally invited me, highlighting the discourtesy of Frank and Hannah's exclusion. Paul's announcement that I was the guest of honor not only spotlighted their deceit, but also their failure to sideline me from the family's milestone event. Frank and Hannah's panic was evident as they realized Paul was fully aware of their scheming, and his smile did little to mask his displeasure. Hannah's attempt to smooth over the situation with a nervous smile and a hasty explanation only underscored their desperation to salvage their standing in Paul's eyes. The unfolding drama made it clear that despite their efforts to diminish my role in the family, Paul's support and recognition of me remained unwavering. In the midst of a heated exchange, Paul decisively cut through Frank and Hannah's objections about my presence at the party, emphasizing my status as his honored guest regardless of my employment situation. Despite their protests that my lack of a job and dwindling finances made me unfit to mingle with their elite guests, Paul was unstayed, hinting at a solution to the very problem they lamented. Without missing a beat, Paul seized the moment to address the gathered crowd, his announcement ready to upend the evening's dynamics. The anticipation was palpable, with all eyes on us, especially Frank and Hannah's, whose nervousness betrayed their uncertainty about Paul's intentions. Their anxiety was well-founded, for Paul was about to reveal a decision that would drastically alter the course of our lives. In a grand gesture fitting of his career's climax, Paul announced his retirement from the CEO position of his company, a role he had cherished and excelled in for years. The question of his successor, which had been the subject of much speculation, was finally answered in a move that stunned everyone present. Paul named me, Barbara, as the next CEO, entrusting me with the legacy and future of his company. The room erupted in a mixture of gasps and applause, a testament to Paul's unexpected but bold decision. I stood there, shocked and overwhelmed by the enormity of what Paul had just announced. This explained his insistence on my attendance and his cryptic hints about Frank's impending comeuppance. By declaring me his successor in front of his esteemed colleagues and rivals, Paul made a powerful statement about his faith in my capabilities and vision for the company's future. Frank's reaction was one of disbelief and outrage. He protested loudly, unable to accept that the position he presumed would be his was being passed to me. Paul, however, remained unyielding, challenging Frank's entitlement and criticizing his work ethic and interpersonal skills within the company. The revelation not only served as a dramatic twist to the evening, but also as a turning point, marking the beginning of a new era for the company and a profound change in my personal and professional life. Paul's declaration that I would inherit half of his shares, with Frank and Hannah sharing the remainder, was a moment of utter disbelief for me. This move not only ensured that Frank could never hold a majority stake, but also cemented my role in steering the company's future. Paul's actions spoke volumes about his confidence in my abilities and his disappointment in Frank's lack of merit. Frank and Hannah's reaction to Paul's announcement bordered on hysteria, with Frank insisting that, as Paul's son, he was entitled to the entirety of Paul's shares. Paul, however, stood firm, emphasizing that family ties alone did not justify inheriting his life's work, especially when Frank had shown no real aptitude or dedication. He believed I possessed the qualities of a capable CEO, unwilling to entrust his company to someone he viewed as undeserving. Frank's plea for me to reject Paul's decision was met with my reminder that, ironically, I was now gainfully employed, thereby addressing their previous criticisms of my unemployment. Paul's amusement at my retort and his display of the legal documents confirming his decision left no room for doubt about his intentions. Frank and Hannah, overwhelmed by emotions, found themselves silenced by Paul's rebuke for attempting to mar the celebration with their objections. The conflict escalated upon our return home, with Frank and Hannah attempting to persuade me to decline the CEO position. Paul's support for my stance and his criticism of their entitled behavior underscored the divide between their expectations and the reality Paul envisioned for his company and legacy. My announcement of divorce from Frank, anticipated by Paul, dismantled any remaining pretense of their accusations against me. Despite their last-ditch efforts to sway my decision, my resolve was unshakable. Recognizing my self-worth and acknowledging the dissolution of my love for Frank, I proceeded with the divorce. Paul's own relationship with Hannah appeared irreparable, as he too contemplated a life apart from her. Embarking on my journey as CEO, I found acceptance and respect within the company, leveraging my skills to chart a new course for its future. Frank, now reporting to me, persisted in his attempts to reconcile, albeit with motives transparently tied to regaining control over his father's assets. However, my resolve remained firm, closing the chapter on our relationship and focusing on the opportunities and challenges ahead as the leader of Paul's legacy.